Number 1.
6 decades ago, the Grimes sisters Barbara, 15, and Patricia, 12, blithely left home to watch heartthrob Elvis Presley in Love Me Tender at the Brighton Theatre in Chicago. The tearjerker ended with Elvis's death in a shootout, the crowd filed out and the Grimes girls vanished. 25 excruciating days ticked by. "If someone is holding them, please let the girls call me," their mother Loretta Grimes pleaded, in a January 11, 1957 Chicago Daily Tribune, now the Chicago Tribune, article. On January 22, 1957, their naked bodies were found in a field in a nearby suburb, with no signs of fatal violence. The discovery horrified Chicagoans and the working-class Catholic neighborhood where the girls lived. With the public demanding answers, law enforcement went into overdrive, interviewing multiple suspects and filing charges, only to drop them for lack of proof as authorities feuded openly. Now the notorious mystery is a footnote in the city's history. Even so, the case is still an open murder investigation, a spokesman for Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart's office tells us. "Our detectives work it as leads come in," Deputy Press Secretary Matthew Wahlberg says. Like many 1950s Bobbassoxers, Barbara and Patricia adored Elvis Presley. They'd seen Love Me Tender 10 times, but begged their mother to let them catch the evening show at the local theater, just a short bus ride away. It was the Christmas holidays, December 28, 1956, and Loretta gave her permission. Barbara, a high school sophomore with a dazzling smile, was known as the serious one, and Patricia, Petey, was a high-spirited 7th grader. The two sisters were also close friends, former neighbor Melanie Forgala tells us. When the pair failed to return by midnight, Loretta Grimes called the police. As officers scoured the city, tips poured in. Workers at a Chicago 5 and dime store were positive they saw Barbara and Patricia with two sailors listening to Elvis records on January 3, 1957, according to the book Murder Gone Cold by Tamara Schaefer. A Minnesota woman, who was traveling, swore she met the sisters in a Nashville bus station restroom on January 9, 1957. That account made headlines, spurring rumors the girls were headed to Memphis, Presley's home. The singer himself issued a statement saying, "If you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries." Loretta Grimes and her ex-husband, Joseph, insisted their daughters were in danger. "They are not the type of girls to run away," Loretta Grimes is quoted as saying in Murder Gone Cold. Chicagan Dominic Pasiga, emeritus professor of history at Columbia College, was 7 when the sisters disappeared. "It was on everybody's minds," says Pasiga, who lived near the Grimes neighborhood. "There were signs in the windows of stores saying, 'Don't talk to strangers,'" he tells us. On January 22, 1957, a passing motorist saw what looked like a mannequin off the bridge over Devil's Creek near Willow Springs, a southwest suburb. Authorities converged and found the girls' bodies sprawled on the frozen ground. "I tried to tell police my daughters didn't run away, but they didn't listen to me," said Joseph Grimes in a January 23, 1957 Chicago Daily Tribune article. Patricia had several minor puncture wounds in her chest, possibly made by an ice pick, and Barbara's face had marks and bruises. Harry Glowes, the chief investigator for Cook County Coroner Walter McCarran, told reporters. A preliminary autopsy, however, indicated the girls died of exposure to freezing temperatures. The anticlimactic resolution with no evidence of traumatic violence amplified the mystery and renewed pressure on investigators. Again, the public chimed in with tips. This included a cabbie's description of seeing the sisters December 30, 1956, at a Skid Row diner located on Chicago's hardscrabble Madison Street with two men, one reportedly with sideburns like Elvis. Police pursuing the diner lead tracked down a young drifter named Edward Benny Bedwell from Tennessee. Bedwell, 21, was a former circus worker who had briefly served in the U.S. Air Force. He had jobs at a factory and as a dishwasher when detectives picked him up for questioning. After several days in custody, Bedwell signed a confession on January 27, 1957, admitting he killed Barbara and Patricia with an accomplice named Frank. As Bedwell told it, he and Frank met the girls at a Madison Street tavern on January 7. They spent a week together, shacking up at various hotels. But on January 13th, after the girls resisted the men's advances, Bedwell and Frank knocked them unconscious, then dumped the sisters in a ditch. "If I hadn't been drinking, I wouldn't have done what I done, and what I done I didn't do intentionally," he told the Chicago Daily Tribune. Loretta Grimes vehemently denied her daughters would carouse with disreputable men. "Our girls came from a good home and were brought up in religious surroundings," she told the Chicago Daily Tribune. Almost immediately, holes started appearing in Bedwell's story. Medical experts concluded the girls died December 28, 1956, and Bedwell's factory time card provided an alibi for the night they disappeared. His defense attorney insisted Bedwell's confession was coerced. Bedwell was released from jail on bond in February 5, 1957, to the chagrin of Cook County Sheriff Joseph Lohman and Glowes, who believed he was responsible. "I think it always bothered him. He was sure he had the right guy and didn't like letting him go," Glowes' daughter, Renee Glowes Block, tells us. On February 14, 1957, Glowes took matters into his own hands. The larger-than-life, fedora-wearing tough son of a gun called a press conference at his family home, Glowes Block recalls. Glowes insisted the girls could not have died on December 28 and revealed lab results indicating Barbara had been sexually molested. He knew and believed the girls were both raped, Glowes Block says. Harry Glowes contended McCarran covered up evidence in deference to Loretta and to keep the sisters' reputations intact, she notes. The coroner held his own press conference the next day and fired Glowes, who continued to investigate the case. After the Bedwell debacle, several suspects emerged but nothing stuck. One was Charles Melquist, a suburbanite, found guilty in 1959 of murdering another girl, Bonnie Lee Scott, 15. Her nude body was found November 1958 in a wooded area, a few miles from where the Grimes sisters died. Authorities questioned Melquist about Barbara and Patricia after police found a list of girls, including young women from the Grimes neighborhood, at his apartment, but that was the extent of their inquiry. Ray Johnson, a former police officer and lecturer who writes the Chicago History Cop blog, thinks Melquist played a role in the crime, but was protected because of ties to the Chicago mob. "Somebody still doesn't want this case to be solved," Johnson tells us. "I know there's at least 3 people alive that know what happened that night." Another theory is that the sisters died after a liaison with teenage boys from a local gang who took them for a ride, then abandoned the two. A local man told police he saw Barbara talking with youths in a car as Patricia watched the night they went missing. One of the boys reportedly told Barbara, "You'll be sorry," the Chicago Tribune reported on February 14, 1957. Some years after the tragedy, Forgalla ran into Loretta Grimes while shopping at a department store. Grimes recognized her, and the two chatted, Forgalla recounts. One of the first things Grimes said was, "Did you hear about my girls?" She died in 1989, never knowing what happened.
Number 2.
Carolyn and Major General Charles Leward were upstanding members of their community in Kent, England. Then, tragedy struck, robbing them of the life they had built and enjoyed together. First, Carolyn was found murdered at a neighbor's country home in Seal Chart, Kent. Just weeks later, Charles took his own life. And though there's been much speculation, the case, widely known as the Seal Chart murder, was never conclusively solved. Charles Leward was a former military man, a golfer, and a local politician who had founded the Patriotic Party. Carolyn Leward was a well-liked friend, neighbor, and frequent volunteer for charitable causes. The parents of 2 grown sons, the couple was settling into the golden years of their life. Their social standing, as upper-class members of late Victorian society, made their untimely deaths particularly shocking and notable. The series of events began on August 24, 1908, a typical summer's day for 58-year-old Carolyn and 69-year-old Charles. They left their home together, on foot. At 2:30 p.m. Charles was headed to the golf club to retrieve his clubs, while Carolyn was planning to enjoy some exercise before returning to the house for afternoon tea with a friend. At 3 p.m., they parted ways at a particular gate. She headed through the gate and down a path that would take her through the woods, past their neighbor's mostly unused summer house, and back to their home. Charles traveled onward to the golf club. Little did the couple know it would be the last time they ever bid each other farewell. Various townspeople saw the Major General over the next 35 minutes as he made his way to the club. At around 4:05 p.m., after leaving the club, the local vicar, driving in the opposite direction, promised him a ride home after completing an errand. The Reverend made good on this word, driving by again and picking Charles up at 4:20 p.m. and depositing him at his home at 4:25 p.m. Arriving at home, Charles was surprised to find Mrs. Stewart, the friend Carolyn had promised to host for tea, waiting patiently for his wife's return. Upon realizing Carolyn was missing, Charles set off in search of her at 4:30 p.m. 45 minutes later, his search ended when he found her lifeless body on the veranda of their neighbor's summer house. She had been shot in the back of the head twice, and her purse and rings were missing. No cartridges could be found. In fact, there was no evidence of the killer at all, save for a few footprints. In the aftermath of Carolyn's murder, many strangers and self-proclaimed experts determined that Charles had killed his wife, despite his tight alibi. He could account for his whereabouts at 3:15 p.m., the estimated time of the murder based on the accounts of a neighbor and a gardener, both of whom heard 3 shots fired in the general direction of the summer house. Furthermore, the Major General offered up all 3 of the revolvers he owned to the authorities, and none matched the bullet holes found in Carolyn's skull. Still, rumors proclaiming Charles's guilt spread. Some believe that Carolyn's missing rings had in fact been taken by Charles to throw police off of his trail. Soon, Charles was receiving hate mail from people vehemently accusing him of his wife's murder. As the days progressed with no new evidence leading to any likely suspect, Charles's hope of finding Carolyn's killer dwindled. Devastated, and a pariah in his community, he put his home up for sale. A member of Parliament, Colonel Ward, offered Charles a place to stay. On September 17th, as soon as the official inquest had ended, Colonel Ward collected the Major General and took him home. Additionally, the lured son, stationed in South Africa, had finally got news of the family tragedy. He was en route to England to be with his father the following day. On the morning of September 18, the day his son was due to arrive, Charles Luard woke up, showered, and walked to the local train station. There, he hid in the bushes beside the track, then committed suicide by jumping in front of a passing train. The General Major met his tragic end less than a month after his wife met hers. Luard's suicide fanned the flames of the Seal Chart murder mystery. In the ensuing years, investigators came to believe the crime was committed by someone Carolyn knew, rather than by a random passerby. They thought her rings had been taken in an attempt to mislead the authorities to the true motive of the murder. In 1914, Sir Sidney Orme Rowan Hamilton, who went on to serve as Chief Justice of Bermuda in the 1930s, wrote a book about the unsolved murder that explored this line of thinking. He put forth the notion that Carolyn's killer was a man named John Dickman. Dickman was sentenced to death in 1910 for murdering a man on a train. Rowan Hamilton asserted that Dickman was connected to Carolyn Luard through an advertisement the former placed in the Times. He believed that Carolyn responded to John Dickman's advertisement, asking for financial help by sending him a check, which Dickman then forged, possibly by changing the amount. Upon discovering the forgery, Carolyn contacted the man and arranged to meet with him, without telling her husband. So the theory goes, Dickman then murdered Carolyn at this meeting to cover his tracks. This is just a theory, however, and has never been conclusively proven. To this day, the Seal Chart murder case remains unsolved.
Number 3.
With elements of romance, whodunits, and twists, William Desmond Taylor's story could have been a movie in itself. By the 1910s, the motion picture industry in Hollywood was beginning to take off, and so was the career of William Desmond Taylor. He started as an actor and became a director, working on dozens of films. But ultimately, what Taylor came to be remembered for most was his shocking unsolved murder and the mystery surrounding it. William Desmond Taylor was shot in his home in the middle of the night, and his death in the midst of a slew of show business scandals led to the start of people's interest in the sensationalized inner workings of Hollywood. William Desmond Taylor was born in Carlow, Ireland on April 26, 1872. He was sent to a finishing school in Kansas when he was 18 and fell in love with America. Between 1914 and 1915, he landed roles in several silent films and made his directorial debut with The Awakening. Over the next 7 years, with a stint in the army during the end of World War I, Taylor directed at least 40 more films. In his role as Captain Alvarez in 1914, he rode a horse at full gallop across a rope bridge, a stunt that the publicity department of the most dangerous in cinema history. Taylor was also made the president of the Motion Picture Directors Association. His gregarious personality and directing talent had him going far in the growing movie industry. But on February 2, 1922, all that potential was squandered. Residents of the Alvarado Court Apartments rushed out at the sound of a scream. Valet Henry Peavy had just found his Hollywood director boss dead on the floor of his duplex, a bullet wedged between his neck and shoulder. When police inspected the scene, they ruled out robbery as a motive and said there had been no forced entry. That was where the hard facts stopped. Everything that came afterward was a series of revelations, peculiar details, mixed witness accounts, and lots of drummed-up gossip. During the investigation that followed, a slew of details flooded the police reports. Neighbors reported hearing a gunshot sound on the night of the murder. A few witnesses came forward claiming to have seen a man with dark hair leave Taylor's apartment the night before. One of the most corroborated details was that Mabel Normand, the actress Taylor was seeing at the time, was the last person to see him alive. She stopped by briefly to grab 2 books, and said when she got there, Taylor expressed worry over Peavy, who he had to bail out of jail for soliciting young men, and over his secretary, who had disappeared after forging checks. Then there was the fact that Taylor had allegedly been dead for 12 hours before the police showed up. There was gossip that when they did show up, Hollywood executives were ominously burning papers in the fireplace. A list of suspects was drawn up. Normand was reported as having a cocaine addiction, and it was rumored that Taylor had gone to the federal government to help catch the dealers who were selling to her. One rumor stated that the drug pushers found out and a hit was put on Taylor to silence him. Mary Miles Minter, another actress who Taylor supposedly had an affair with, was also pointed to as potentially committing a crime of passion. Minter's mother, Charlotte Shelby, was considered, as well as it had been known, that she was enraged with the 49-year-old Taylor for his affair with her teenage daughter. One of the more interesting details of the investigation revealed that Shelby allegedly owned a rare .38 caliber pistol and some unique bullets, which were very similar to the kind that had killed Taylor. However, that evidence was deemed insufficient for an indictment of Shelby. Then the investigation took an even stranger turn. 2 days after the murder, it was discovered that Taylor had a secret past working as a traveling thespian, an antique dealer, a hotel night clerk, and a Yukon prospector. It turned out that William Desmond Taylor wasn't even his real name. His actual name was William Cunningham Deanne Tanner, and he was married to a woman in New York named Ethel May Harrison, who he had a daughter with. He'd abandoned them both to move to Hollywood. Harrison, who was a member of a very popular dance troupe called the Floridora Sextet, hadn't heard from her husband since October 23, 1908. The first time she saw him after he left was on the big screen in 1919, when she went to the movies by chance, not knowing her vanished husband would be in it. And just to add an extra dose of weird, it was revealed that Taylor had a brother, Dennis Dean Tanner, who disappeared from New York in 1912. The press's penchant for embellishing and hyping the story only added fuel to the fire. After the murder, 300 people across the country walked into various police stations to confess to the murder. But there was never enough evidence found and nobody was arrested for the murder. On the heels of million-dollar comedian Fatty Arbichel's manslaughter charge and actor Wallace Reed's drug-related death, Taylor's murder spurred a newfound interest in Hollywood scandal. To provide damage control, Hay became president of the Motion Picture Producers and Directors Association, heading a censorship and studio control campaign in Hollywood in order to clean up its image. But a media circus surrounding the film industry is clearly one that hasn't died down. And the same goes for William Desmond Taylor's murder, which still baffles people today.